"Hey," said generous Flophouse VIP members Mandy and Chris, "Matt, would you want to talk about the Godzilla fighting games?" Why, yes. Yes, I would. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, Save the Earth, and Unleashed came out at the right place and the right time. The advent of DVDs, which were cheap to produce and opened the floodgates to foreign films, was a huge boon to fans of kaiju and tokusatsu films in general. And while Godzilla had a fairly prolific career in video games during the 80s and 90s, releases slowed down considerably, especially in North America. Once DVDs hit the mainstream, Sony, due to their relationship with Toho, started releasing much of the Millennium-era films in the early 2000s, as well as most of the Heisei era, which were notoriously hard to find on VHS when they were new. So then, all you needed was a video game company to take advantage of this surge in popularity of radioactive monstrosity. And at around this time, the master of taking advantage of popular trends was Infogrames. Atari, who were able to wrestle the rights to Godzilla and many other famous monsters from the notoriously protective Toho Studios to make a brand new fighting game for the Nintendo GameCube. In terms of a developer, Atari tapped Pipeworks Interactive, who are best known for nothing. I ain't joking. In the early 2000s, the only thing they had produced was early tech demos for the Nintendo GameCube. Yes, Pipeworks' very first title was Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, which is not a bad way to start off your career in the video game industry. At its core, the Pipeworks trilogy were arena fighters that featured Toho's most popular monsters, and had them brawling in a variety of modes with a story component keeping things cohesive. Well, as cohesive as, kaiju cinema gets.
It's what we do.
Destroy All Monsters, of course, is a subtitle that shares a history with the film franchise, but was also used for the teased but never released localization of Kaiju Daikessen for the Super Famicom. Fuck you, Nintendo Power. The addition of Melee, I have to imagine, was added after the monstrous success of Smash Bros., which released almost 12 months before Godzilla Damn hit GameCubes in October of 2002, and that word association worked a treat. Despite average reviews, it wound up selling more than 300,000 copies, which was incredibly impressive for a third-party effort on a Nintendo machine, as it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to accomplish. Now, admittedly, the lineup of monsters was a bit on the paltry side, but it did lend itself to grow the roster through more sequels. Alright, we got 90s Godzilla, Godzilla 2000, Mechagodzilla 2, Mechagodzilla 3, while his real name is Kiryu, but whatever, Anguirus, Orga, King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah, Megalon, Rodan, Gigan, and Destroyer! So yeah, that's it. Now, while it is on the smaller side, it's nice to see that Pipeworks included a mix of creatures throughout all the major eras. Damn's story revolved around the Vortek, a cheesy alien race that's straight out of drive-in films from the 60s, complete with drive-in films of the 60s warbling alien music.
Engage teleportation beam.
This is one aspect of the presentation I'm not the biggest fan of. It's weird to add a lot of monsters all the way up to the 2000s, but still adhere to this very distinct, kinda dated theme. Yes, there were a few early Godzilla films that went nuts with cheesy outer space plots, and I'm fine with an antagonist alien race, but maybe going with something less specific and more general wouldn't make it feel a bit misplaced. For example, War of the Monsters used the same drive-in theme, but the entire game and its roster was built around that, so it worked much better. Anyway, bouts consisted of monsters stomping around in a 3D cityscape, where they're able to punch, kick, bite, throw, and shoot various colors out of various orifices. You can also pick up buildings and toss them at your rubbery suited foes. And finally, you can let out all your by grabbing the associated glowy icon, which lets you perform a screen-clearing super move, something Pipeworks would and wouldn't reiterate on in future games. Like mentioned before, there's a good amount of content here, as you'll need to unlock various monsters, arenas, concept art featuring lots of classic Noriyoshi posters through a variety of modes like destruction and team-based skirmishes. Playing the game again, personally, I'm surprised it's still so much fun to control and smack shit around, and when 4 players are on screen, it's a chaotic good time. Although, I have to say, the camera pulls out so much during these 4-player brawls that it's sometimes hard to see just what the hell is going on. Is that Gigan? Who is that? Who am I? As a lifelong Godzilla fan, Damn was a treat to play at the time, and a great early GameCube title. An Xbox version of it released the following April and featured improved load times, graphics, custom soundtracks, do you remember that one? But no meaningful content additions. That version is also the one I recorded footage off of for this video, just FYI. Apparently, Pipeworks had a PS2 build cooking, but it was cancelled as they decided to move it over to Godzilla Save the Earth. Released in November of 2004, Save the Earth is a sequel in the truest sense. There's honestly nothing too drastically different over what was offered in Melee, especially in the gameplay department. For the returning monsters, their movesets are almost carbon copies, although some rage attacks look way more devastating. However, it's the new additions to the roster that make it the better of the two. This includes Mothra, a step up from her non-playable role in the last game, Baragon, Megagarius, Mogra, and Space Godzilla as the new big bad. Jet Jaga, Jet Jaga, Saga Jaga. Ah yes, and Jet Jaguar makes his long-awaited debut. While within the business-like hallways of Toho, the weird robot seems to be kind of forgotten / ignored, but American fans just fucking love him, mostly due to Mystery Science Theater 3000. Well, on that note, as mentioned earlier, Toho is a notoriously difficult company to work with, and each character is their own separate license. That's why you see a trademark next to every name. So Atari need to get the rights to every individual monster, so big ups to the people who fought for the guy whose head looks like Jack Nicholson. In terms of story, well, the Vortek are still the villains here, but they're played slightly more seriously, or should I say more menacingly, and the FMVs used throughout have definitely seen a bump in quality. Hell, the game even has a super hype opening intro. Oh man, look at that shot! Martin Scorsese, eat shit! The same modes make a return as well, but with the addition of challenges, which were fun little diversions that might be familiar if you've played some other party fighters in your day. Basically, you have a bunch of wacky objectives that spin the rules on the combat a little bit, but also give you some shooting sections and other silly stuff. The better you do, the more currency you accrue, which is used to unlock monsters and arenas and even more concept art. I find it plays faster than Melee by a certain percentage, but I wasn't exaggerating when I say it's almost the exact same game, just with an expanded roster. Now, they did add affinities for each character. Some are weaker to energy moves or slashing attacks, while others dish out more damage by doing them. It's new, sure, but when you're in a furious 4-player match, this minutia doesn't really add all that much. Now, the weird thing about Save the Earth is that it only came out for the PS2 and Xbox, completely skipping the GameCube, you know, the console that helped make this series a thing. This was a curious omission because it was foregoing literally almost the entire fanbase, but it's par for the course for Atari, who excelled in stupid decisions. Producers cited that they wanted to focus on online play, which the Xbox version certainly had via Xbox Live, and the PS2 barely had if you bought the network adapter. Now, the GameCube could do online as well, but of course you needed to actually develop your game to use it, so, you know, maybe don't put an online mode in the GameCube version. I don't know why they just left that money on the table, but that's Atari Grames for ya. 2004 was also an important year for Godzilla in general, as it was the 50th anniversary of the franchise. The gallery mode also had a Final Wars section, which was the new movie for that year. It contained tons of concept art of monsters new and old, redesigns for others, and exciting stuff that, like, none of which made it into the game. Now, the plot of Final Wars isn't even dissimilar to Save the Earth. Just swap out the Vortech for the Matrix goth stylings of the Zillions. Like, why not just make a game based on Final Wars? Then we could have got the Hagar guy in there, or Gino. It's a shame, but at the end of the day, Pipeworks and Atari had their arms tied, as Toho most likely didn't want to play ball. That being said, if you see a copy of Save the Earth, it's probably your best bet to get your sweaty Japanese man action fix, because the next and final entry to the series was Godzilla Unleashed. It is now the futuristic world of 2007. Godzilla films are in one of their dormant phases, as Final Wars was the proverbial nail in the coffin to the Millennium series, being the poorest performing film since the 70s. Between Save the Earth and this, Pipeworks also worked on the PSP port of Warrior Within, the Wii port of Rival Swords, and even Midway's Rampage Total Destruction, so they kept themselves busy. Unfortunately, Godzilla Unleashed, while having a lot of good things about it, is marred by a bunch of bad decisions from Atari. Firstly, it was now a Wii exclusive, which, again, I wish they could have remained consistent, maybe stick with Xbox and PlayStation consoles, focus on that online play, and then release a Wii-specific version maybe later on? Okay, no, let's just lock it down to one console, or two of them. Kinda? What is this, Kingdom Hearts? Yeah, so even though this was 2007 and the PS3 had been out for a year, there was a terrible PS2 version of Unleashed that was essentially just Save the Earth with a new skin. It features none of the gameplay tweaks, lacked all of the new characters except for Batra, who was a PS2 exclusive, but then this version does have new music and stages, so it's this weird hodgepodge that pleases absolutely no one. And it also runs about as well as Hedora on a toilet, meaning very sludgy and slow. Anyway, we need to focus on that Wii iteration, and in 2007 it absolutely was the hottest device in gaming, so I can't fault that. However, Atari felt that since they were putting this out on such a revolutionary system, this fighting game that used pretty much every button on a typical controller should utilize motion controls. Exclusively! Now, one great thing about the Wii is that it let developers and publishers choose from a variety of control methods and then letting the player decide which they prefer.
Jump.
In Unleashed's case, it had one, the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Now, since the game was built on the same engine as the previous ones, there was no way they could adequately shoehorn motion controls in a natural way. So unfortunately, it comes down to an extreme case of waggling, as you need to shake the controllers for additional attacks, to run, to jump, and to throw, making the game nigh unplayable. To compensate for this, Pipeworks increased the general movement and gameplay speed, because if it had played in the same gear that Damn did, but with motion controls, yeah, no thanks. And the main plot is that these mysterious crystals are wreaking havoc across the globe, and that's it. The story is actually surprisingly bereft of anything, really. And in not better news, the solid-looking FMVs from the previous games have been axed. In their place were frugal-looking comic book-like sequences and text to get most of the story across. Now, fortunately, the additional monsters that were wrangled in more than make up for this. All the previous kaiju return, but with the additions of the original G-Man, Godzilla 1954, Varan, King Caesar, Biolante, Titanosaurus, and finally, Crystalak and Obsidius. Never heard of those last two? Well, I'm not surprised, as both are all original characters that were designed by Pipeworks. There was initially a variety of monsters, but these two were whittled down by fans in a vote. And they're fine, I guess. I mean, I would have preferred more actual monsters from Toho be included, like Kamacuras or Manda, Baby Godzilla, Monster Zero, Hedora, but I guess Atari wanted to hold a contest to generate more fan interest as like a marketing main thing? Regardless, this move wasn't received enthusiastically by the Godzilla community, as there was much grumbling about 2 OCs being added in lieu of fan favorites. Graphically, while Unleashed is more technically advanced, a lot of unneeded visual flourishes were implemented, like bloom lighting and other effects that kinda gave the game a slightly darker, blurrier look. The stages/cities reflect this the most, as since in kayfabe they had all been ravaged by the crystals, resulting in apocalyptic colored lighting, giving the game a slightly more otherworldly feel. Finally, there's critical mass, which puts your monster into an overpowered state, replacing the unique rage moves from the last 2 games. And despite looking cool, I don't think this was an improvement. Now, one nice feature about Unleashed is that it let players completely customize every match. You can add teams, change the winning conditions, the amount of human ordnance being fired at you, their AI and priorities, whether it's point-based, destruction-based, KOs, all of the things. But, I mean, when you can't properly grab an enemy because they're close to a building, it doesn't matter all that much. So, it'll be no surprise that Godzilla Unleashed wasn't nearly the success the previous games in the trilogy were. It was completely buried with a torrent of poor reviews, which of course mainly lambasted the controls. Pipeworks would go on to the Deadliest Warriors series of fighting games, porting Devil May Cry to the Xbox 360 and PS3, and eventually even returned to the Godzilla franchise in 2014. Fans might remember the unmemorable Godzilla Smash 3, which was some type of mobile thing. I don't really understand it. As for Atari, well, they went out of business in 2013, I think, but now they make casino games, maybe? But then their name has merged with Natsume? I don't know. Regardless, it's this style of game, the monster arena fighter, that still has its fans today, and Save the Earth and Damn even have their own competitive scene, if you can believe it. In terms of new projects, there's the recently released Override Mech City Brawl, the upcoming 13 AM's Dawn of the Monsters, and Passion Republic's Giga Bash, all of which look like they might capture what makes this style of game so special. Now, while 2003's War of the Monsters came out only a few months after Melee, it's safe to say that it, combined with the Pipeworks trilogy, and if you want to go way back, SNK's King of the Monsters, did a lot for kaijus and video games, and it's nice to see that fans of both genres will be stomping and roaring for years to come. So, thanks again to Mandy and Chris for inspiring this retrospective. And if you have any other games or franchises you want me to take a look back on, let me know in the comments below, or smash up the Flophouse VIP Patreon to let me know what you'd like to see. Scream!